'cause I love this land. It takes my breath away.
Good morning. It's actually morning. I'm Steve. I'm from Texas 10, and you will see a couple things that are a little bit different today. First, I'm missing my partner, M'Lissa. As you might know, M'Lissa runs a school here in Waco, and she had an event that she just couldn't miss, and is very, very sorry she's not here. And then obviously we're in a different place. Here we are, we're in the Fabled Bookstore here in Waco. You know, that's our home base, and we'd love for you to come visit Waco. When you're in Waco, this is a must stop. We're here on 4th Street. They're open 9 to 9 Monday through Saturday, and then I believe it's 12 or 1, a little more limited hours on Sunday. But it is just a fabulous place and a great setting for what we're going to talk about today, because I have with me George Getschow. And George, you are the director. What is your actual title?
Director of the Larry McMurtry Literary Center.
All right, so the Larry McMurtry Literary Center. And we're going to talk about Larry a lot today, reintroduce people to him. But first, I want you to talk, well, first of all, where is the Literary Center?
It's inside a place called Booked Up, which is a world-renowned cultural center. I call it world-renowned because Larry had spent years collecting 700,000 books in Archer City, and the Larry McMurtry Literary Center now houses the last remnants of his grand collection. We have about 250,000 books.
And so, okay, you mentioned a couple things there: a world-renowned, a cultural center, and Archer City,
yes.
Right? And so we Texans, we're proud of our culture, but usually when you hear cultural center, you think the Bass Performance Hall or the Houston Museum of Fine Arts or in Dallas, you know, those sort of things. Archer City as a cultural place. Again, for people that might not be as up as we are on the geography of Texas, where is Archer City?
It's about 20 miles south of Wichita Falls. It's about 2 hours by driving west from Dallas.
Okay. And so what is the mission of the Literary Center?
The mission is to preserve Larry's remarkable book collection and perpetuate his legacy. We're very concerned, like all great authors, when they pass from planet Earth, their literature often fades with them. People forget what a great author so-and-so was. I mean, there's writers that were famous in their time and now they're forgotten. And many of those authors are sitting on the shelves of Booked Up, Larry's former bookstore, that are now inside our literary center. We want to make sure that Larry's collection of books and his life as a novelist, as a screenwriter, as a teacher, as a cowboy, is preserved, because he led this epic life, a life that really changed the way I think many of us, especially from outside of Texas, view Texas and view the American West.
Well, and we'll get into it a little bit more in a minute about a book that you collected and helped write. And one of the writers in it made the point that outside of many people's, like how people view Texas was shaped by a number of people, but none more important than Larry McMurtry.
Absolutely.
And so let's just do a quick reset. I think you do talks at schools and things, right?
Yeah.
And you were telling me off camera, you'd recently been with a group of high schoolers and you had asked them about their knowledge of Larry McMurtry, and what did you get?
Well, what I got was blank stares.
Right.
They didn't know who Larry McMurtry was. I asked them, did they know Did they know anything about a book called Lonesome Dove? No. Did they know anything about Brokeback Mountain, his screenplays? No. So it was kind of shocking to me.
All right. Okay. So, and I'm sure we may have people now. We have a lot of Texas fans, and so they're probably a little more attuned to that. But let's reset. Who was Larry McMurtry?
Well, now you're asking a question that I could talk about for 5 hours. He was a complex character, like the characters in his novels. He was somebody that loved Texas. Some people question whether he loved Texas because he was very critical of the state and very critical of some of the writers that came from the state. He didn't feel anyone ever captured the state and the American West as well as they could have and should have. And he also was critical of himself. He never felt that he measured up to the greatest writers of all time. He called himself a minor regional writer. We all laugh today because he was anything but that. He was one of the greatest writers of the 20th century. His work will endure forever and ever. I consider him probably one of the greatest writers who's ever graced the planet.
Right. And so, one of the reasons that I reached out to you and had the show is so much of, not all of it, but so much of his writing was about Texas, and it seems to me like it was all informed by Texas.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about, and this will segue back to why you're in Archer Cities, but tell us a little bit about how Larry grew up, what his lifestyle was, and sort of what formed him as a writer.
Yeah, well, that's the best question that anybody could ask me, because Larry was shaped and formed by his ranching legacy, his ranching heritage. He grew up as a cowboy on this hard scrabble ranch south of Archer City called Idiot Ridge.
I love that. I just love that.
And it was a tough life. You'll see pictures of Larry on his pony called Polecat. That pony used to drag him through the sagebrush and the mesquite, tore him to pieces. He once fell off his horse in this terrible rainstorm, nearly drowned in the Wichita River. Cowboying was a tough life, and he knew firsthand the harsh realities of what it meant to be a cowboy. And that's what I think distinguished Larry from many other Western writers who romanticized the American West, romanticized Texas. Larry toggled that line, that territory between those that portrayed the American West, Texas and the American West, in sort of this glamorous way, and the harsh realities of the frontier. And that territory was McMurtry territory.
Well, and so it seems to me that I guess the cowboy era, like the name that springs to my mind and I don't know anything about him, but Louis L'Amour sold I don't know how many millions of books, right, about the West, and then you have the movies with the Gene Autry characters and all of that sort of stuff. So
the Lone Ranger.
So when Larry when did his first novel come out?
HUD came out, and it was 1961.
Right. Okay. And so Larry's starting to write and be known in that time period, and there was this, and still is, this huge romanticization, if that's even a word, of cowboys and the cowboy life.
Yeah.
And so you touched on it, but go a little deeper into what Larry's take on cowboys were. I mean,
well, that's a great question. Nobody's actually asked me that directly, but Larry's take on cowboys was one that he respected them and admired them, and thought that they were their own culture. The cowboy culture was surrounded by the cowboy myth. And Larry often talked about the cowboy myth because the myth was that cowboys are like the Lone Ranger. You know, they ride off into the sunset happily ever after. But in fact, there was his life and the life of other cowboys that he knew well, because he worked with them, not only on his ranch, but on surrounding ranches, was that it was a life that was harsh, as I said, difficult, but also a life that he adored. It's odd because even though he thought cowboying was a disappearing culture, he also loved it and appreciated it and admired the cowboys that he knew, to the point where I think he reincarnated the people, the cowboys that he knew during his life, working on that ranch and working on neighboring ranches. They all became reincarnated in his Western novels. And
Right.
so there was always this, they were complex characters. Yes, they were honorable. That's one of the things they loved. They were loyal, and they were hardworking, and they loved the land. And that's all of those things Larry felt deeply. That's what he valued about the cowboy life.
Well, and so those characteristics that you just started talking about, I know a little bit and a lot more now from having met you, about how Larry translated those into his own life after in his writing. And
Yes.
so, hardworking. Tell us about Larry and hardworking.
Well, that work ethic that he learned firsthand on the ranch, getting up at 5 in the morning to go out and move cattle, or grub mesquite, or mend a fence. All of those things were transferable to his writing life. He got up at 5 in the morning to write. He wrote every day, 7 days a week, just like he did when he was a cowboy. He had to herd cattle, mend fences, grub mesquite 7 days a week. And that's what he did as a writer. He was the hardest working guy I've ever known.
Right. And then in terms of the land, the love of the land, how did that inform him as a writer?
Well, now you're on to the subject that is that all of Larry's literature comes out of the land. He called it his blood country. The Idiot Ridge and the surrounding ranch land of West Texas and North Texas was, for him, the inspiration for every novel he ever wrote. In fact, one of Larry's rituals before he started work on any novel, whether he was living in Washington, D.C., or whether he was living in Phoenix, or wherever he was living, or Tucson, I meant, wherever he was living, he always came back to the ranch and walked around the perimeter of his ranch, Idiot Ridge, over and over and over again, summoning the ghosts of the past, summoning the characters that would occupy his novels, that would inhabit his novels. And these were, these became, as he was mulling over in his mind and in his heart and, down to the very bone of his being, he was always thinking about his past, his grandparents, the frontier people that followed after them. I mean, his grandparents were, they settled, they came on a covered wagon from
Right.
Missouri and dropped their wagon on Idiot Ridge, and that was the root of the McMurtry legacy.
Right. And so, I mean, today people tune into 1823 or the Yellowstone franchise and all the rest of that, helmed by Taylor Sheraton. We'll ask about that in just a second. But there were real people that did those sort of things, right?
Absolutely. I mean, people can say what they want about Taylor Sheridan's work and some of the other modern day Western movie makers, but it's true. I mean, everything, the covered wagons, the buffalo, all of that was part of the American West. It was part of what we all visualize as what the American West was and still is. That's the romantic part, is the American West has changed. It's now the modern American West. And there's still this sentimentality that bothered Larry a bit about writing, because it's a landscape that Larry knew, and he knew how complex it was. He knew that it was all these issues that the Texas and the American West were facing were this, basically this great collision between the old Texas and the old American West and the modern Texas and the modern American West. There was so many, that clash created tensions and rivalry. The small rancher, like the McMurtry family, they were driven out by the larger ranchers and by the oil and gas industry. And he knew all these complex things. He knew the oil business better than anybody I knew. He used to quote me and tell me what the oil price was on a day-to-day basis. I mean, he was that kind of guy.
Well, and so let's talk about, you're here to preserve the legacy of his literature. So let's connect it to some of his works, okay? His first work was Horsemen Pass By, and it was became more famous as the movie HUD.
Yes.
Right? Starring Paul Newman.
Right.
Who else was in that movie? Patricia Neal.
Yeah, I'm bad with actors.
Melvin Douglas, I think, was.
Yes.
Filmed in Claude, Texas,
Yes.
in Armstrong County. And that's a great place to visit, by the way. You can go to the Goodnight Ranch there, and that's a great little stop. But what was that book about, and why? Where did it come from Larry?
The book was about Idiot Ridge. It was about Larry's family. It was about the cowboys that he knew. It was about every character in there was all part. That was all. As I said yesterday, it was autobiographical. Everything, every character in there. In fact, he uses the word Idiot Ridge in that book. He's writing about his own ranch. He's writing about his grandfather. He's writing about his cattle herd who was, infected with hoof and mouth disease, and how the government was trying to take the ranch away, and all of these great conflicts and turmoil are issues that the McMurtrys faced on their own ranch, and Larry witnessed.
And so, did he envision himself as the Paul Newman character?
That I can't tell you. I never asked him that question.
Right. Well, I like to envision myself as Paul Newman. But
Me too.
Right. Yeah. And we're probably talking to the youngsters that don't even know who Paul Newman was.
Right. Exactly.
All right. But okay. So that was a great start to a career, and many people, writers, would be happy with that as their career, right?
Well, especially because he received sort of these incredible, I would call them reviews from the literary world. I mean, they were mesmerized by the book. They were writing these blurbs about Larry McMurtry's book, Horsemen Pass By, as if it had revolutionized the writing about the American West. The book didn't sell very well until the movie came out. And when the movie came out, the book started selling quite well.
Well, so that's really interesting, and then because he is so connected to movies as well as book, the one that resonates with people of my generation and maybe just a little bit older is The Last Picture Show, which great movie, and on top of it, just a fantastic book. So it's in the movie, it's Anarene. In the book, it's Thalia, but I think everybody understands where it really is. Yes. Which is?
Archer City.
Okay, which is where Larry grew up. That's the actual town. That's why you're there in Archer City, or the institute is there. Give just a short synopsis of the story and then what its impact was.
Well, a short synopsis of The Last Picture Show is that it was a portrayal of small-town Texas life, about the ecstasies of small-town life, about the perversions of small-town life, sexual and otherwise, but also about people that were trapped in a place in which the world was, modernity was pressing in on them, and they didn't know how to really connect with all the issues that they were facing. All small towns have, as you well know, are facing all kinds of calamity. And these were people that were trapped in a place where there was no great future for their children, no great future for no entertainment, no the sort of things that modern American youth demand and expect. And so you were trapped in a place that was, for young people especially, a very difficult place to live, and where there was expectations and stereotypes and sort of these norms of behavior. And if you broke outside of those norms of behavior, you were considered sort of a pariah. So Larry revealed all of that in The Last Picture Show. And for the first time, I think he wrote about a small town and the peculiarities and the conflicts and the weirdness of small town life in a way that I think just absolutely has enthralled not only the literary world, but the movie world, because he also ended up writing the movie, co-writing the movie with Peter Bogdanovich, The Last Picture Show. So you have this town and you have this movie that are inner, they become surreal. Right. It's like these two worlds Larry was able to bridge in a way that no other writer has ever bridged. In the same way he wrote about the American West, I think Larry also carved out a new niche in writing about small towns in Texas.
And so it was interesting to me when I started to think about it, is that because he was doing this in the 60s,
yes,
that there was probably a receptiveness to looking deeper into what American culture. I don't know that he would have been as successful in the 40s or 50s where everything it would be unpatriotic to do
Right.
that. And there was a lot of criticism
Oh, yeah.
anyway in the 60s, but there was an audience for it.
Yes.
So besides his immense talent, his work ethic, which you've talked about, I think his timing was almost perfect in terms of when he was able to communicate these.
You know, I've never considered that, but that's really shrewd,
Yeah.
and I'm sort of stunned by that question. Nobody's ever said that, but I think that's absolutely true. It would not have been even possible to publish that book in the 40s and 50s.
Right.
I think you're right.
Yeah. And so that sprung him to a whole new level of fame, I think.
Yes.
Didn't he win the Academy Award for screenplay?
Yes, he did.
Yeah. And so now you've got this guy that's got, and so what did he do with that in terms of, all right, now he's got a career that has a ton of momentum. And so where did he take that after that?
Well, the first thing he took it at, he ended up almost in a brawl with the town mayor. That was where it first happened when he was, he became a pariah in Archer City as a result of that book. Even his parents wanted nothing to do with that book. They hid it on the top shelf. Larry signed a book to them. They hid it on the top shelf of their home so that nobody could ever see it. And it became one of those taboos. You just didn't talk about the Last Picture Show ever in Archer City, because if you did, you might get the wrath of Larry's mother or whatever. And so it was, you know, that's the reality of Archer City in terms of literary acclaim, in terms of that. I would say it catapulted his career to a whole new level.
Right. And then, so he continued throughout his career to write about the West. And I mean, so I think there's 5 books with Dwayne as the...
Dwayne's Depressed.
Right. There's
Dwayne Moore.
Right. Exactly. And Dwayne was an oilman eventually, right?
Yes.
And so that book wasn't as much about cowboys as oil people, or that series at least. But then the other thing that, I mean, chief among the many other things that he is known for, and particularly connected to Texas, is our Rosetta Stone to the Old West. I would think you would, or that's what I view it as, Lonesome Dove.
Right.
All right. So tell us a little bit about the history of Lonesome Dove as a work of art and how it came to be.
Well, first of all, I couldn't agree with you more that it was a work of art. How it came to be was Larry was living in Washington, D.C. His father, who was a rancher, died, and he moved back to Archer City to mull over his relationship with not only his ranching roots, but also with his father. And he loved his father a lot, deeply. And his father felt he lived in he was a cowman, knew ranching life, knew the landscape is better than anyone in, I would say, even, I could go on and on about this, but he was a die-hard rancher, and he knew the way of the ranching life, the ranching ethos and all of that. He was considered one of the greatest ranchers in the region. And yet he felt he was born at the wrong time in the wrong place. He wanted to be a trail boss. He wanted to be on those great cattle, on the Chisholm Trail, driving cattle across the plains to the west. And that's what he felt. He always told everybody that he felt he was living in the wrong time. So what does Larry do? He reincarnates his father's yearning to be this great trail boss in Lonesome Dove.
Right. And so it's just an epic tale. It's a long book. It's 880 pages or whatnot.
He called it his Gone with the Wind.
Well, and I think it's sort of achieved that level of fame in terms of, especially, so I objected to the minor regional, not only because it minimized him, but we're not a minor region. We're Texas, right? So, but then it became the acclaimed miniseries and has lived on in people's imagination for a long, long time. But what an awesome, I can't say gift to his dad because his dad had passed at that point, but what an awesome remembrance. I mean, I don't, did he get emotional about talking about that, or?
He got tired of talking about it. Lonesome Dove, oddly, even though it was by by universal sentiment, was that it was the greatest book written about the American West ever.
Right.
And yet Larry, tired of it. He got tired of all the people asking him about Lonesome Dove, and he finally got to the point where he just refused to talk about Lonesome Dove, and he would say, it ain't no masterpiece.
Right. Well,
he really downplayed it, and
he was wrong about that.
yes, but when you asked whether he got sentimental or emotional about it, no, because he grew weary of it. He grew weary of all the people that all they wanted to talk about. And Larry thought he was much more than Lonesome Dove.
Well, he was. Now, he was right about that.
Yeah, but he didn't articulate it that way. Larry would never say, I'm much more than Lonesome Dove, because he really, truly did. As great a writer as he was, he truly believed that he was a minor regional writer. And by that he meant he compared himself to the 700,000 authors that he brought into Archer City as part of his great, call it the cattle herding of books back into, or the herding of books back into Archer City. And there's no doubt about it. He compared himself to every writer that he surrounded himself with. And when you do that, when you compare yourself with the Tolstoys and Dostoevskys and all of the great writers of all time, Larry really was a minor regional writer. And he said he only named one or two American writers that even could be considered more than minor regional writers.
Well, so let's segue a little bit. You talked about the 700,000 writers that he brought in. I had always had the impression, because I'd been to Booked Up when it was open, that he was just a huge funnel. He just bought a bunch of stuff, and then I found out that is not true at all. That he was people talk about art collectors and they have a great eye and whatnot, and that he was a book collector of that ilk. So tell us a little bit about his book collecting habits.
I'm glad you did, because that was his passion. More than writing, it was book collecting. He adored books, worshiped books, clutch books, cherish books, and so every book that he had acquired was important to him. And people said, oh, well, he brought these 700,000 books in, how many did he read? Well, he read every one of them, not cover to cover, but he read them well enough that he was actually able to price them. He'd put his initials in them, and occasionally he'd put his commentary inside the books. And he would say, for example, if at first he thought the book sounded pretty good, and the further he got into it, might mark a price. Okay, this looks like a pretty good book. I'm going to mark it at $15. And then he'd read into the book a few more pages, and he didn't like it. He'd cross off the 15, put $10 or $5, say too sentimental for my taste.
Right.
And here it is. He's a bookseller. But he didn't really want to sell the books. The truth is that the reality is he was an aggregator. That's what he called himself. In the end, he said, I really didn't want to part with my books. So he had them in, and I was in the store many times when customers would come into the store. They'd spend hours looking for a book. They finally found the book they were looking for. If his clerks weren't there, Larry would go behind the cash register and he'd look at the book, and somebody would be really excited. Larry, I found this book. I'm so excited, and I'm so glad you had it in your bookstore. Geez, ma'am, I'm sorry I haven't read this book yet. I'm not going to sell it.
That would be disappointing. So just on the logistics of it, tell us a little bit about how Booked Up came to be. I think it was in different locations, and how it came to be and what happened to it, and that will lead us back, I think, to the Institute. So,
yeah. So Larry closed. He had bookshops all over the country. He had one in Washington D.C. He had one in Dallas. He had bookstores in Houston. He had bookstores in Tucson. He closed all of those bookstores, moved every one of those books to Archer City. Why did he do that? Because he said he grew up in a bookless town in the bookless part of the state. So he had this bold vision, bold literary vision. His vision was to transform Booked Up into his version of Hay-on-Wye, which is the famous Welsh town where the streets are teeming with bookstores and book lovers and bibliophiles and all of that. And that was his dream, and he actually wrote about that in a magazine, which we have on display at the Larry McMurtry Literary Center, and he was actually advertising across the country in antiquarian book magazines and literary magazines. Booktown is born in Archer City. And so that was his bold, audacious move. Larry wanted the town, he wanted to make a statement that literature mattered, and it mattered in a way that for him it was the world, it was everything. His literary universe revolved around those books, and so now our literary universe revolves around that books. It's so important that these books be appreciated, marveled at, that young people, old people, people in between, people from all walks of life, not just writers, but people that are readers and love literature and love every form of literature, fiction, nonfiction, poetry, biography. We could go down the list. Larry's appetite and his appreciation for literature was global, and he has books from all over the world. He has this huge Tolstoy collection. He has this huge Flaubert collection. He has all these great writers from Europe and Russia and Czechoslovakia, and it goes on and on. And then he has scholarly books. He has law books. You're a lawyer. He has law books everywhere. Right. He has books on fishing and hunting, and then he has books on Native American Indians, and it goes on and on. It's like you walk into this place and you go, this is the inside of Larry McMurtry's mind. It's so expansive, it's so universal, it's so global, and you go, oh my God, that's what we're trying to preserve and perpetuate and show people that this matters.
So I think in 2015 I visited and went to Booked Up, but then they left,
right?
Right, and now they're back. So tell us that story.
Well, what happened is in 2012, I think it was 2012, Larry had what he called the Great American Book Sale. I forgot what it was, in which he wanted to downsize all those 800,000 books that I mentioned, because he didn't want to burden his heirs with having to deal with all these books. That's a lot of books in 4 bookstores, and so he had this great book sale. Collectors and bookshops from used bookshops from all over the country came in, and there was this auction, and Larry participated in this auction. He was the maestro of the auction. But honestly, at the end then they sold about 400,000 books that day, and semis were coming in pallets, and Larry was putting on a good face, making it seem like he was talking about, books need to be my grade. He'd use the word my grade is great, that my books are, my herd of books are being moving down the trail to another cattle station and blah, blah, blah. And he was going on and on about it. And at the end of the day, I could see he was depressed. It was like, it was sad. Yeah. It was a sad day for him. He really didn't want to get rid of his buddies, his companions.
Okay, and so tell us a little bit about the center and what you've brought back to Archer City and how that relates to Larry.
What we brought back is Larry, the remnants of his collection that he had in Booked Up #1 and 2. There's 4 bookstores. Booked Up #1, 3, and 4. Those buildings have now been transformed into other buildings. One is it's a fascinating. His Booked Up #4, which is where he had his main poetry collection, is now a classic car showroom operated by the Alls, a great family there, and they really appreciate and admire Larry. And they're going to have a little movie theater with showing Larry's shows. That's the influence that he has, even in their. But I mention that because you're asking, what the LMLC is doing. So the remnants of those books were all put in Booked Up 1 and 2. There's books on the floors, there's books on the ceiling, there's books in storerooms, there's books everywhere. The books that didn't sell during that auction in 2012. We ended up buying from Chip and Joanna Gaines 6 months ago. We bought what they had bought, and they had bought the flagship store, which is Booked Up #1, that has the big Booked Up sign that is this internationally renowned bookshop, Booked Up. They bought that, and then the remnants of that was Booked Up, the flagship store, and then the store across the street where there was 80,000 books. We bought all the books from Booked Up #1 and Booked Up #2 from the Gaineses. We did not buy the building. The Baptist Church bought Booked Up #2. So we have 250,000 books that are remnants, the last remnants of Larry's massive book collection.
That's still a large herd.
Oh, it's a large herd. And we're having a hard time managing that herd. We've got books on pallets. We've got books scattered all over the floor. We've got books in storerooms. We've got to sort all these books out. That's one of the things we're doing now. And as we do that, we've been astounded by the quality of the books that are there. Again, every one of them contains Larry's markings. That alone makes them irreplaceable and priceless. So we have collectors coming in all the time. We're selling books now for a $25 donation for most of the books. We also have Larry's private library collection, which also we haven't talked about, but that's one of the most renowned collections in the world. It was purchased by a fellow named James Gannon, who's on our advisory board. He's a famous, I would say, nationally acclaimed book collector and appraiser. He knew Larry, Larry knew him. He ended up buying Larry's private collection of books, which is a 30,000 volume collection. We are also a distributor for that collection. And those books are actually branded with Larry's, every one of those books that are Larry's crown jewels of his collection, he branded them with his book plate, which is an upside down stirrup of the family ranch brand. And that shows the heirloom. And so these are books that he would spend hours and hours and hours reading and rereading. He just loved his private collection. And it was one of the most famous private collections in the country, actually. He had an astounding private collection and astounding public collection. Right. Altogether, we're talking, close to 1 million books.
So the center itself, where are these books housed and how are they housed? And if I wanted to make a donation, how do I get the book?
Right. Okay, that's a very good question. So all the books are housed. I would say not all of the books. Many of the books are housed on the shelves. We have no room left in our bookshop. Again, we had to move 80,000 books from booked up number 2 to booked up number 1, which is the building we're operating, which is now the Larry McMurtry Literary Center. So we have books, we are booked up, right. Totally and completely booked up, right. To the point where we're trying to manage and move these books out. That's why we're selling books now. We wouldn't even want to sell these books. I consider them irreplaceable and priceless, but we have no place to put them. So we are selling for at least until we can get these books off pallets that are sitting on the floor. We're sorting through them. We're trying to move the herd out into our showroom area where where the transactions take place. But it's going to take several years for us to, I would say, reduce our inventory to the point where we can manage these books.
So do you get foot traffic in Archer City? I mean, how does this work?
We've had hundreds of people come in who have heard about our reopening, and there are hundreds of people from across the country. New York, California, coast to coast. Last week we had some people in from New York. We had somebody that came in with a Hat Creek Cattle Company T-shirt. I mean, this is the sort of diehard.
If you haven't read it, Hat Creek is the Lonesome Dove Cattle Company. But
yes. And we've had librarians come from Baltimore. We've had ranchers come from all over the country, and they come in and they look around, and you don't see the entire collection as you walk into the front area of our showroom area where we have a huge collection of books, but behind in the garage area is where Larry's cathedral of books, his temple of books is. And by the way, I have to say this, most people don't realize, if you want to know the extent to which Larry worshipped these books, he called his bookshop his temple of books. His temple,
right.
And he got married inside Booked Up. He directed in his will that his ashes be kept in Booked Up forever and ever. Of course, when Chip and Joanna bought it, that wasn't possible. And so you asked me what we're going to do with it. We're going to eventually, as we work through all the repairs and renovations that we're doing on the building, we're starting to do that work now. The building's in bad shape. As we work through that repair and renovation phases, and we're doing it in phases, we're going to keep the bookshop open, but we're going to be doing this construction. Eventually, we're going to have a gift shop. Eventually, we're going to have exhibits, lots of exhibits about Larry's life as a cowboy, his life as a screenwriter, his life as a teacher, all of these things. We're going to have a little movie theater inside that will have continuing.
Is it going to be the Royal, or the Royal is still the Royal is the movie theater in the last picture?
It'll be a mini Royal.
Okay, all right.
Very mini Royal.
Well, so you have a ton of work to do.
Oh my God!
I mean, and that that relates to the breadth of his collecting, and it relates to the breadth of his own work.
Yes.
And so I think we haven't touched on his nonfiction. We haven't touched on his books set in Houston. There was a series of books in Houston, probably the most famous of which is Terms of Endearment, because another great movie was made out of it. I told you last night, one of my favorite McMurtry books is Roads, which was about his driving habits. I mean, the immensity of his impact, his work in all of these areas, it's just like we could have a series about this instead of an episode. So I'm so thankful for your insight and the work that you're doing, God's work here. So
I appreciate that. It's an honor to be doing this work.
Right. And so just let's hear a little bit about how you got to be doing all of this.
Well, in 2005, I brought a group of, I was running a literary journalism program at the University of North Texas, where Larry also attended.
Right.
Got his BA from University of North Texas after flunking out of Rice University. But that's another story. Right. He ended up being a teacher and a creative writing instructor there eventually.
A shout out to Matt Peterson, my buddy from high school who went to Rice, huge McMurtry fan, used to be at the book, so I just wanted to shout out to Matt.
Right. Right. And so how did I get to know Larry? So I took this literary journalism class there, very creative class, great writers. I selected the writers that I felt would be, find the experience worthy of their time and money and all that stuff. So we went to Archer City thinking Larry would embrace us and take us under his arms, but no, he lived up to his reputation of being curmudgeonly and wanted nothing to do with us for a variety of reasons I found out later, but we won't go into that. But then the class, the 20-person class, put together a book about the McMurtry family and about Archer City, the place he really loves, even though he wrote this difficult, this sort of scathing account of the town. And he liked it. He liked this little book we put together, and he called me up and he said, "What do you need?" That was it.
Right. And so you've told me a little bit that if you could, because he did have a reputation for being curmudgeonly, I think that's probably the great adjective for it. But if you could cross a divide with him, then he was the best friend you could have. So what was that divide? What did you have to cross to get into Larry's world?
The divide was people that cared and appreciated about reading. Reading was if you were a reader and if you loved literature and you were willing to engage with literature in a way that he engaged with it, which means that you spent a lot of time reading books, hanging out in his bookstores. He kept his bookstores open all night for writers that came that I brought there. And I brought writers there for a dozen years. And Larry mentored them, befriended them, brought them into his home, showed him his private libraries, this renowned private library collection. We went into his home in Archer City, which used to be it was the golf course headquarters, if you will. He bought that home. He turned it into a book, basically another repository for his book, wall-to-wall books. And we would go in there and we would all be just mesmerized by Larry's books, no matter where you were. You went into the bathroom of Larry's home, there was books everywhere. Above you'd open up the shower curtain, there's books on, it was like crazy. It was like, anyway, Larry, if you're right. If you were a person that cared about literature, you didn't have to be a writer. You just had to care about reading and about what literature can do for you. If you demonstrated that, Larry took you under his wing.
Right. And so the sort of last topic, the impact, I think you captured in a project you did after Larry's passing. It is the book Pastures of the Empty Page, which is a McMurtry phrase. He came up with that originally. It is. And it is a series of essays by people who were affected by Larry, mentored or affected in some, worked with him to write. And so many of them are great Texas writers.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that project and sort of how you see what he brought to the world in the 60s and 70s and sort of opened up this view of the New West. tell us a little bit about the project and what you hope to accomplish with it.
What I hope to accomplish with Pastures of the Empty Page is to show the very personal side of Larry. All of the writers that we brought together in the collection, in some ways, their paths crossed with Larry's, and Larry's affected them in profound ways. It's a very personal account. It's also a revelatory account. I think people will see sides of Larry's that they didn't know about. His generosity, his leadership, his determination to create a book world, you know, and make it important. And I could go on and on about Larry, but what I think the most, to understand Larry, I think you will understand Larry from reading Pastures of the Empty Page in a way you couldn't if you were reading a traditional biography.
I couldn't agree more. I've gotten about 3/4 of the way through the book. Yeah. And I've learned I'm, as people can probably tell, I'm a huge McMurtry fan.
Yes.
And you think you know him just through his writing, and then I've read other accounts of him, but this, it comes at it from so many different angles. It's like looking at a diamond and you see the different facets that you don't necessarily, when you're not studying it, you don't necessarily pick up on. So I thank you for your efforts on that. Your piece in it was great, as is every piece in it. I mean, I guess if you ask a bunch of great writers, you're going to get good stuff.
And I must say, the book is important because all the we've dedicated all the royalties from that book to helping support the Larry McMurtry Literary Center. So every book that's sold goes directly towards the center. The writers get none of the proceeds from that book. And I must say, it was a labor of love, to use a terrible cliche, but it really was. I think that Pastures of the Empty Page will endure because Larry McMurtry will endure.
Well, my last question is sort of topical. I thought about this last night. We had an event here at Fabled last night, and it really bothered me about the high school students. Really bothered me. Yeah. And it seemed to me like we talk a lot about reading lists these days and what you can read in high school and what you can't and whatnot. And Larry's books had a lot of sex in them sometimes. So I don't know if this will really fly, but it seems to me like if you go to a public high school in Texas, you should have to read a Larry McMurtry book before you graduate.
It should be required reading.
Right.
I couldn't agree more. And it was disappointing to me as well when I put on a workshop not long ago in Highland Park. I asked every student, do you know Larry McMurtry? Who's McMurtry? They had no idea. Have you heard of Lonesome Dove? Right. No.
It is just stunning to me that at least I will say, Kendall Howen and Kelsey, they know, right?
Yes, they do.
I would not have let that happen in my house. But I can't thank you enough for your time and, obviously on the podcast and whatnot, but really for what you're doing to perpetuate that. The whole reason we exist is to talk about Texas, and nobody has ever talked about Texas. And I think you said last night, nobody ever will talk about Texas the way Larry McMurtry did.
If I can say one thing, I'm just Larry's literary torchbearer. And what I'm hoping for is that people from across Texas especially, but from the American West and across the nation will come to the Literary Center and immerse themselves in Larry's epic life, legacy, his literature, and everything else, because it matters. And all you have to go to our website, have them go to our website, and because they'll get a sense of what the Literary Center is about. They can sign up, they can get updates on what's going on, and they can help us because we need a lot of help. But bottom line is, what I really want them to do is when they come to Archer City, when they walk into Booked Up, that it will change them the way it's changing us. We have a group of volunteers that have been absolutely astounded. I mean, we walk in there every day and we get more and more volunteers because people can't leave. They just don't want to leave.
Well, so it is the Larry McMurtry
Literary Center.
The Larry McMurtry Literary Center. So if you Google that or whatnot, and you've got Facebook and Instagram, all of those. Do you know what the handles are for those?
I do not.
Okay, all right. Well, We will put them on the screen.
Okay.
Right? We will find
Okay.
that we won't say them, but they will be on the screen.
Perfect.
So in a social media world, go to there to keep up with what's happening at the
Yeah.
Larry McMurtry Literary Center. Again, thanks to Fabled. You tell me, what would Larry think of Fabled?
Larry would be impressed, and he would be giddy inside. He wouldn't demonstrate that outside because he wasn't that kind of person.
Right.
But he would say, "Wow, this is
Mhm.
the kind of bookstore that I really feel warm feelings towards, because it's so, the vibe is just cheerful and delightful and welcoming and all of that."
Right. And so Fabled, again, thanks to them. They're on 4th Street here in Waco. When you're in Waco, make sure you make it a stop. And their handles are all at Fabled Bookshop. So make sure you go there. Obviously, Texas 10, our handles are all at Texas 10. We'd love for you to like, share, subscribe, comment, do all of that stuff. But the big ask that I have for you today is, if you haven't read McMurtry in a while, I hope you've read McMurtry, but if you haven't read McMurtry in a while, go get yourself a McMurtry book. Go to the library if you need to, or come to a Fabled, or go to Archer City and get yourself something from the Literary Center there. It has informed people about what Texas is, because it was so true. That, it's one thing to create a vision of a place, but the authenticity that Larry brought to it is what makes it so enduring, I think. And so, George, thank you so much. That's our show for today. Keep watching, tell a friend, and go to Archer City. Bye.
And I love this land. Oh, it takes my breath away. From the Palo Duro to the Gulf Coast Plain, from the heart of the hill country to the piney wood shade. I love this land. It takes